Race, ethnicity, and inclusion. We have a lot to cover today, and it starts right now.
The Whitney Reynolds Show was made possible by Theraderm. We believe that every person should have the opportunity to look as refreshed, young, and healthy as absolutely possible. Children's Learning Place, excellence in early childhood education since 1998. Sharp Vision Modern LASIK, believing is seeing. Sciton, because results matter. Fresh Dental, keeping smiles fresh. And Kevin Kelly with Jameson Sotheby's International Realty. Luxury is an experience, not a price point. And by other sponsors, Hollis Plyman and Company, CPA firm. The Cryo Bar. Cellular Intelligence. Tutu School of Chicagoland. Deluxe Cleaning Services. Chicago Andrea Creative. Goldfish Swim Schools of Chicagoland. Barkbusters Home Dog Training. Instagram My Selfie. And Export Fitness.
Our show is dedicated to moving the dial forward, and today we are covering a topic that has been a difficult discussion from our history, yet expanding the conversation will bring hope to the present and the future when it comes to inclusion. We are talking race and ethnicity. You're watching The Whitney Reynolds Show. Not repeating history is a common thread we hear when it comes to inclusion issues, and our first guest is one that speaks directly to this. Duncan Ryukin Williams immigrated from Japan at 17 years old to attend college and Harvard Graduate School. He now is a Buddhist priest, teaches on religion and culture, and authored a book on the internment camps. He joins us now with more. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Whitney.
Well, so you wrote a book on internment camps. And for people watching that might not know the term internment, what does that mean?
So back in World War II, right after Pearl Harbor and the beginning of that war, the U.S. government kind of suddenly and forcibly removed 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry, two-thirds of whom were U.S. citizens, from their homes up and down the west coast of the United States, from Oregon, Washington State, California, and put them in these camps that were kind of hastily constructed in the interior regions of the Mountain West, and two camps in Arkansas. But internment was the idea that you would place all of these people, families, grandmothers, everyone who was Japanese American for the duration of the war inside a camp that had barbed wire, armed guards, and usually kind of desert-like remote conditions.
Was it because they thought they were a threat to our safety?
That's right. So the Japanese American community was viewed as a threat to national security. So even though the United States was also at war with Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, it was only the Japanese that were kind of rounded up in this way. And that's why a lot of people point to the fact that probably racial animus or prejudice of that time led to the targeting of that community as a national security threat.
And the way you stumbled upon getting interested into internment camps is fascinating in itself, because you are one that likes to know things, and you are a Buddhist priest.
Right.
And so you, I think, have combined this beautiful way of knowledge and also studying up on the past,
Right.
and you found a diary.
That's right. So back when I was a graduate student at Harvard, I was finishing up my PhD dissertation. And just at the end, my professor, my main advisor, passed away. And when I went to his office to help his family clean it up, I discovered a diary written by his father in one of these camps. And I translated it for that family. And then in the process of doing that, I had to learn more about what happened to these people, like his dad, and what happened to, uh, tens of thousands of families that were suddenly told by the government, you don't belong. You are a threat to national security. And most people were given like a week or 10 days max to sell their farm, businesses, disenroll from college. Your life was kind of disrupted. And you were told you're going to be taken to a camp. You can take what you can carry, which for most people meant one suitcase.
Right.
And so if you can imagine, you had to scour your house or apartment and figure out, what am I going to put in that suitcase? Because I'm going to a place unknown and for duration indefinite. What are you going to take? So that's what confronted all of these Japanese American people on the West Coast.
Well, and then whenever you got to the end of the diary, did you feel like there was no doubt, like you have to publish this and make this into, a piece of living history that people can understand? Because up until this moment, even in my own life, I didn't know a lot about internment camps. And being an American citizen born here, I think, man, that seems pretty crazy. But like you were saying, history has a way of repeating itself.
It certainly does. And, even before the World War II camps, if you think about immigration and how people were included or excluded in America, the very first law, the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, that's the first federal law around immigration. And that had to do with the fact that a particular group of people, the Chinese, were not welcomed in America because of their race and also their religion, the fact that they're not Christian. And if we think about how things are operating even in our current times, these kind of enduring questions of inclusion and exclusion based on race on the southern border or based on religion with the administration's travel ban, that these are still live questions for us today about who can belong and who can be called a true American.
Yeah, how do we get down kind of to the root of that? How do we examine it? Is it kind of like each person for themselves to look in and see how you feel on it?
I think it's a recognition of multiplicity. Like if we can recognize like what is America, and if we can understand that America is actually such an amazing country because of multiplicity, because of multiple kinds of migrations. It's not just, England became New England, York became New York, and that kind of direction of the American story, but that for Asian people, their American story is not westward ho and trailblazers going west, but they're going to Hawaii, California. There's an eastward story. For Central Americans and Mexicans, their journey is a northward story. For African Americans, there's a forced migration. There's multiple kinds of migrations, and each group that's come to this territory, this land called America, they brought their languages, their cultures, their religions, and I think the founders are really smart in putting freedom of religion right there in the First Amendment of the Constitution, that recognition that pluralism, that multiplicity was actually, and freedom was going to be what characterized America. So I think that's where we can kind of hopefully come to an agreement that America is made in its history and in its future by recognition of how we are multiply interconnected with each other.
Wow, that is beautiful whenever you speak to it like that, of kind of this ever-changing flow of it.
Right.
So with the book that you wrote and you have out, you now speak on it. Do people ask you all the time, like, did you have family involved?
Right. I was born and raised in Japan. My mom is Japanese and my dad is from England. And I came to the U.S. as an immigrant myself when I was 17 years old to go to college and then on to graduate school and work. And so I actually don't have family members who are connected to this history. And in a way, being a slight outsider to the Japanese American community, they shared with me some things that, internally, it was a kind of traumatic experience for many families, and they wanted to shield their children and so on from talking about that difficult time. And so I'm part Japanese, so I'm inside enough in the community, but not of it. That's been something that's been interesting to interview people. I interviewed about 120 camp survivors as well as veterans of World War II.
Wow, that is truly amazing. And what I think is really cool too is that like you didn't have any family impacted by this, but you're still bringing and shining a lot of light and hopefully we're changing the way we go forward.
I agree.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Whitney.
Inclusion, this real-life issue, is also impacting Hollywood. We sat down with actor Vivek Kalra on how this has impacted his career and also how this theme played out in his new movie, Blinded by the Light.
When it comes to this movie and we talk about inclusion when it comes to race and ethnicity, is this something that really played out?
It's important. People are realizing it's more important, and now there's a time where there's a sort of influx of stuff with brown folk in it, and black folk in it, which is really cool. And it's because we're marketable, and people are realizing that people have been deprived of seeing themselves on TV or on a cinema screen for such a long amount of time. So now that there's this sort of vast influx of it, it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time to be around.
Was it something when you were studying for the role that you were kind of like, oh, how is this day and age? Like, how far have we come? Or did you relate?
I personally haven't dealt with, the levels of racism you see in the film are quite sort of horrendous, getting spat at by people on the street. But the thing that's important to know is just because that I don't, face racism on a day-to-day basis doesn't mean that other people still don't in this day and age as well. So I think it's important to, regardless of whatever your circumstances are, to understand that not everyone's are the same as yours. And I think, I was saying this earlier, perhaps we're living in a sort of not so United Kingdom and a slightly less United States. You know what I mean? So it's an odd time to be around.
What advice would you have when it comes to stereotypes, and especially when it came to your character or you personally?
Just don't play a stereotype. You know what I mean? If you're an actor, you don't have to do it. Like, as simple as that. If the part's a stereotype, have an issue with it, because it's important to have an issue with those things, because otherwise you might just be playing that doctor part for the rest of your life. And it's sad, but it happens to so many people. And you need people like Gurinder and people like Safraz who can tell these sort of wonderfully nuanced Asian stories.
Our next guest, Marlon Bowden, is an immigrant turned attorney who uses her voice and books to further today's topic. Let's take a look. Well, we are glad to have you with us today. Actually, we booked Marlon after we taped the show because once we heard your story and found out more about you and your journey, we said you are a must on the Inclusion Show. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you are here today. You came in from New York and you are originally from Honduras.
Yes.
So your new book that just came out, you actually became open about being an immigrant from Honduras.
Right.
Why did it take you this long?
Because I always felt welcomed in America since I came here with my family at the age of 7. We moved to the Bronx, and so New York City was actually, as diverse then as it is now. So I'm sure that helped and made a huge difference. But I went through school, I went through college, I went to law school, I became a lawyer, I was practicing law. I had just published my first book. And then I started feeling under attack, like many or just about every other immigrant in America does now.
Based on your race, ethnicity, moving over, like what made you feel attacked?
Being an immigrant, people are just so angry, and they're targeting a lot of their anger at immigrants, saying, you're taking our jobs, and which is really actually not the case. There are 2 jobs that immigrants take for the most part. One is the jobs that pay forced labor wages, less than minimum wage. And the other is highly specialized jobs, such as people who have PhDs, et cetera. So we're not really taking, for the most part, the jobs that most Americans want, because these are jobs that have no benefits. So yes, I think almost every immigrant will tell you that, we do feel now that there's a lot of hostility to immigrants.
And just to clear up, like in case people are watching and they're like, wait, so are you an American citizen?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm a naturalized citizen.
So, but then like in the recent culture, you felt like, okay, I need to say I am an immigrant.
I wanted to say it for the immigrants who are powerless, for the immigrants who are working at these menial backbreaking jobs that pay less than minimum wage, have no benefits, who feel that at any turn they might, be deported or any such thing.
So when it comes to immigration and inclusion, have we moved the dial forward?
No, we really have not. It's actually going backward. We used to be a much more welcoming country years ago, not now.
What can we do as a culture to, make immigrants feel more welcome?
I think we can continue to talk about it and to continue to say what the reality is about the economy. We shouldn't blame immigrants for whenever the economy is bad. And we should look at, when we say things like, well, they're here taking our jobs, we should look at what jobs they're actually taking. Immigrants, as I said, they for the most part are working in jobs that don't have benefits, that pay way less than minimum wage. I used to represent immigrants who had wage disputes, and I calculated, I divided the number of hours that they worked by how much they were paid in a week, and they were getting paid effectively around $1.50 an hour.
You've opened my eyes today to a whole new world whenever I think of inclusion and what that looks like when it comes to immigration and our race and ethnicity and how we can do that. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Next up, we have John Register, a TED Talk speaker, Paralympic silver medalist, and expert on today's topic. He's here to explain how his lineage has taught him to overcome adversity, and it's something we must pass on to the next generation. Welcome to the show.
Whitney, thanks for having me.
Today's topic has been one that we've covered different sides of it. And really, I have you on right now because I want to talk about the history that you not only learned as a kid, but you want to make sure is enforced going forward.
Right. So I grew up in Oak Park on the west side of Chicago. And, as a kid, you just grow up with other kids around the block. But sometimes there's a change that happens that shifts your identity or shifts what you perceive about yourself or others are perceiving about yourself. And for me, I had just finished up, I think, in at the Ridgeland Commons swimming pool. I was a lifeguard, pool guard, whatever, and I was saving my money up during that summer to buy a Schwinn bicycle, black Schwinn, black and gold. It was awesome. It's going to be on Harlem Avenue, and I was just about to pick it up, and I went down to pick it up. After I earned my money, the guy sold it to me, and I was riding it back home, and I crossed over Ridgeland Avenue, going back to my house right there on South Ridgeland, and woo! The cop car stopped me, and a police officer gets out and really kind of cost me about, that's not your bike. Where'd you get it from? Who'd you get it? Where'd you steal it from? What you need to get that back to the rightful owner. And you think about it, I've just worked all summer long to earn money to buy something, and to have somebody tell me it's not mine was just devastating. A neighbor from across the street saw the whole incident coming, unfolding, and knew that I had, worked all summer long for this bicycle, and actually went in on the police officer saying leave that kid alone. He's been working all summer for that bike off of Ridgeland Commons, and he's just, this is the first day he's got to ride the bike, and this is the experience that you had. So right at that one moment in time, I knew something had been changed. Something was a bit different.
When you felt that, was that kind of that moment when you then started talking more to your parents about your family's past?
No, not at that point. There was another incident that really shook me and solidified that moment. And I was with one of my white friends, Michael Ryan, who we were looking for some Father's Day cards down in the basement of the store. Didn't see anything. He went across the street. I kept on looking. When I went up the escalators to walk out the door, I was accosted by another police officer, thrown against the front window of the store, frisked all the way up and down, and he whispered in my ear, when I find something on you, you know where you're going. When I find something on you, you know where you're going. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Two, I'm thinking about he's going to put something on me.
Right.
I have nothing in my pocket. I'm going to meet my friend. And I was traumatized by that. Mike and I go back to my father's house back on Ridgeland. And he comes back home, and he begins to walk me through this process of what happened. Oh, tell me that again. One more time. I just want to make sure I have it all right. So he's getting me ready for this confrontation that he's putting together with the store owner. And so in front of my accuser that was there, we wound up being able to have the conversation. I said it for a third, fourth, fifth time, whatever, when the gentleman was actually in the room and I was more calm to say it. Because first I was froggy. I wanted, I wanted to just fight, right? But my father taught me how to fight with your words. And so we got a letter that this gentleman was fired from his job. So later on, I'm thinking, okay, what did that do to him? Did he have a family? Did he have, children? Was he supporting some aging loved ones? Why was he in that mode for that? But it also opened up what my father fought for back in '63: civil rights, voting rights, down jailed in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and with 9 other white ministers. He's a Presbyterian minister. And he has this badge of honor, courage, and the things we have right now that make it possible to elect a Barack Obama, that they fought for back then as those young men and women. So that's what opened up that window for me.
So taking it back to your dad, because what you just said about him is so extremely powerful, and I feel like these stories need to be told. You said he marched. Tell me about what he did.
Yeah, so, the whole family was really very in the civil rights movement. They were the ones who were marching for the rights of others, and things that he might not ever see in his lifetime, but he's paving the way for those individuals.
That's what's interesting is like even being so beyond the moment of now. And I feel like in the times we live in, we sometimes are in an instant world.
Absolutely.
That you don't think about, the future generations. And so how are you teaching now your family about what your dad taught you?
Well, modeling is everything. And so I was very fortunate to have somebody to model behaviors for me, right? So my dad was able to model for me exactly what I can now model with my children. So I know there's some things that are harsh in our world that they're going to have to face. No matter what the television or the political structure is going to say, there's some very physical things that you have to know in order to survive in this America. And one of them, I told my son, he was about to take his car down to Texas to go to school. I said, you need to have your insurance card ready, available in plain view as you cross over into Texas. You also need to have your registration, make sure everything's going on. So I took a police officer, walked the entire car with him before he left Colorado, where we live now, and to go down. And I said, you're going to get stopped, so just know that. And so you just need to be respectful, hands at 10 and 2, just say yes sir, no sir. Don't give them a reason to reach for a gun like you have a weapon. And so not 10 minutes in, he calls me across the line and says, Dad, I just got stopped. I said, you remember what we just talked about? This is what you do. Now, we take a pause there, right? Because we prepared, but now after the fact, we have to leave legacy. We have to begin to open up a dialogue and have conversation, or else it just begins to be this tit for tat and going back and forth. Oh, that's not really happening with the police. Oh, yes, it is happening with the police. And now you got this rift and this fight. And so how do we then have that conversation to actually go further and go deeper? And my belief is that you just have to put it out there to help people to understand where you're coming from in your most authentic voice possible.
Oh, that's
and
good.
it's just moving on with facts. And I know it's tough with facts, with these days, but facts are facts, and we have to uncover all of them. And I believe you can't argue both sides of the issue. You're not authorized to talk on the issue.
So say that again, because I find that extremely powerful.
If you are not able to argue both sides of an issue, you have no right to talk about that issue.
Because until you understand where possibly the other person's been.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the mindset of what my father was trying to teach me, to make sure that I understood that this man had a family, that even though he did something violation and wrong, there's an outcome that he is getting that's probably going to have an impact on his life. And so how can we not have a detriment to happen to both people? Right. And how can we actually, really come together?
That is so powerful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Absolutely.
This topic on inclusion when it comes to race and ethnicity is an ever-changing landscape. We've heard about pioneers who have blazed the trails and met people that are keeping the path moving forward. Well, that's our program for today. Remember, your story matters. For more information on today's show, visit whitneyreynolds.com.
Go beyond the interview with Whitney Reynolds' 52-week guide of inspiration. The book goes deeper with the topics you see on The Whitney Reynolds Show. To get your copy for $12.95 plus shipping and handling, go to whitneyreynolds.com/store and use code PBS. The Whitney Reynolds Show was made possible by Theraderm. We believe that every person should have the opportunity to look as refreshed, young, and healthy as absolutely possible. Children's Learning Place, excellence in early childhood education since 1998. Sharp Vision Modern LASIK, believing is seeing. Sciton, because results matter. Fresh Dental, keeping smiles fresh. And Kevin Kelly with Jameson Sotheby's International Realty. Luxury is an experience, not a price point. And by other sponsors, Hollis Plyman and Company, CPA firm. The Cryo Bar. Cellular Intelligence. Tutu School of Chicagoland. Deluxe Cleaning Services. Chicago Andrea Creative, Goldfish Swim Schools of Chicagoland, Barkbusters Home Dog Training, Instagram My Selfie, and Export Fitness.